All right, today we're going to be taking a look at a video from crossexamined.org. The video title is Another Self-Refuting Argument Against the Bible. I listened to about half of this, and what I realized is that he tries to give an argument against um, an argument against the Bible. And it's funny because he self-refutes his self-refuting argument. We'll just get into it and hopefully clear that up a little bit more. It can be a little confusing, so let's get into it.
My question is pertaining to Mormonism.
Yes.
I listened to your most recent podcast on false preachers.
Yeah.
Specifically, when I talk to a Mormon, I have some great engagements with some good friends of mine who are Mormon. Any type of contradictions I bring up with the Bible as the base of that contradiction, they usually respond with, well, that's your interpretation, and you are a flawed human being, so you could have a flawed interpretation.
Okay, stop right there. When somebody says you must be wrong because you're a human being, you could...
Well, that's not what he said at all. He didn't say you must be flawed. He said you could be flawed. And that's true. You could be flawed. You'd have to give some backup evidence to your interpretation, and even then it could still be flawed. Even if you have a lot of knowledge, there's always more knowledge you can gain, which can always change your current interpretation. So you should always just assume that your interpretations are flawed and always be looking for ways to prove your argument or confirm your argument or to refute your argument. Just always be learning. But he didn't say you must be wrong. He said you could be wrong.
You'd say, well, then you must be wrong about this because you're a human being.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
See, it's self-defeating to say, true, human beings do err, but human beings don't always err.
Okay, so what he's talking about is interpretations of the Bible. Human beings could be wrong about their interpretation, but they're not always wrong about their interpretation. So what you would need to do is have some type of methodology to show why your interpretation is correct against somebody else's interpretation. Otherwise, it's just yours versus theirs, which is what the person from the audience, that's what he's asking. He's asking, how do you know that your interpretation is correct? But Frank is right here. Your interpretation could be wrong, and that's what you would respond back to, supposedly a Mormon, saying, well, then your interpretation could be wrong. And that's absolutely right. But what's the methodology to see that your interpretation is more accurate than somebody else's interpretation?
And by the way, there are a lot of inerrant books out there. It's not just the Bible. Most kids' books are inerrant, right? See Socks Run. 2 + 2 = 4, right? There are a lot of inerrant books.
Yes, there are a lot of inerrant books. 2 + 2 does equal 4. But the difference is that we can go and we can show why 2 + 2 = 4. When you have some type of claim like Jesus resurrected, well, that's not the same as a claim of 2 + 2 = 4. You can get 2 items and you can get 2 more items and you can put those 2 items together and you can count them up and show that the 2 items plus the 2 items equals 4 items. You can dissect this in many different ways. There's no interpretation of 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 just equals 4. You can't do the same with a claim like Jesus has resurrected. You would first have to even show that resurrection is possible. And even if you got to the fact that resurrection was possible, that still is just proof of that one claim. You still would have to show that Jesus is the Son of God, Jesus has divine powers, he's the Trinity, he, all the other baggage that comes from the Bible. But you can't even get past the first step of showing that resurrection is even possible, let alone plausible.
So the idea that men must always err is false. Men often...
Nobody said that. That wasn't the claim wasn't made. He's arguing against a straw man of this guy's argument right now.
Often err, but not always err. So that would cut against the other person just as much as it cuts against you.
Yes.
So it's a self-defeating argument.
Yes.
And then if they say that it's my interpretation of the text, which...
Well, it certainly is my interpretation, but that doesn't mean mine is wrong.
But it also doesn't mean that it's correct. What's the methodology?
What is your interpretation? And let's use the best information we have to discover what the text really means. Because, look,
the problem with that is that everybody uses the best knowledge of the interpretation to show what the text really means. Everybody does this, and different people do this, and different people come up with different interpretations, and they all have really good methodology to show that their interpretation is correct. But one interpretation is no more or less correct than another person's interpretation until the author comes down and tells you, well, this is what I actually meant by saying that. Otherwise, it really is just opinion.
Any of you are Christians in here, or Mormons, whatever, and you're in a Bible study, and someone says, hey, Jordan, what does this verse mean to you? You know what you ought to say? Doesn't matter what it means to me, okay? It matters what it means in the text. I don't want to read my word. I want to read God's word.
But when you're reading God's word, that's what you're doing, is giving your interpretation. So, I mean, is Frank taking the literal stance? Because from his other videos, he does not take a literal stance. He says there's a hyperbole in the text, there's poetry in the text, there's all these different kind of things where it's not a literal interpretation. So he's just confirming. He's doing what I said in the beginning. He's self-refuting his self-refuting argument. What is said has to be interpreted through a lens of your own biases. And that's what he's doing. That's what other Christians are doing. And I mean, that's even what atheists are doing. That's what everybody's doing, because the author of these texts is not here for clarification.
Okay? So you're trying to get what the meaning of the text is. And for that, you've got to do some digging. You've got to try and discover what the text is. It's not just my interpretation or your interpretation. It's trying to discover what's in the text. So you just use the best tools you have and then try and discover what the text means. But here,
that's interpretation, Frank. When you use the best tools that you have to try to discover what the text mean, you know what's another way to say that? Interpretation.
here's a question that you might ask somebody, whether they're a Mormon or whether they're an atheist or is Muslim, whatever they are. The question I would ask is, if historic Orthodox Christianity were really true, would you become a Christian? And see what they say. Now, somebody could reverse that and say, well, if Islam is true, would you become a Muslim? You have to answer that question. But here's the reason I don't think Islam is true, okay? Yeah. Here's the reason I don't think...
If it were true, would I become a Christian? No. No, that's very easy to answer. No. At least not right away. Maybe if there's a lot of justifications for some of the important stuff that's in the Bible, but definitely not right away. No, I mean, that's not a hard question. Muslim, if Islam was true, no, same reasons. There's terrible stuff in all these religions. Just follow it just because it's true. I would just then accept that it's true.
Mormonism's true. Here's the reason I don't think Buddhism's true. Here's the reason I don't think Hinduism's true. Here's the reasons I do think Christianity's true. The question is, are we going to follow truth? That's the question.
Apologetics are pretty awful. I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. I don't know. Most apologetics are awful.